All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about substances and triggers to using substances. For people who are not fully aware of what substance use issues look like, I'll just be explaining that. Now, this isn't to be considered or taken as medical advice. I do work in the mental health field. I'm not a licensed clinician. I'm not assigned to anybody listening to the podcast, so therefore I cannot offer treatment recommendations or anything along those lines. And this is being recorded after hours, so I'm also not I don't have access to supervision or any kind of director or anybody to consult with. So this isn't part of something professional. It's more like educational and entertainment. But so a lot of times people wonder kind of what, first of all, is considered a substance. A lot of things that are considered substances are there's stuff that people would label as like hard drugs, something that's like socially acceptable, but it's still a substance. And then there's stuff that's socially acceptable that most people don't consider a substance, but it still can alter your brain chemistry, your mood, your processing speeds, like intellectually, your sleep patterns, your physical energy. So I'm going to be talking about some of these things. Now, pretty much a substance can be just about anything that alters in a certain way. And a lot of times people think about, if I'm stoned or high or, drunk, or something that would be considered not sober, that means that's the only thing that's a substance. But there are a lot of things that surprisingly are substances, and I'm not going to cover every single possible thing because there's so much, and I don't really, it wasn't really my intention to record for too long about this. I'm just trying to get in a recording that might be some helpful information. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because a lot of things going on lately with politics and, wars and the economy and, people in the LGBTQ plus communities, people who are, women, minorities, or even people who aren't ethnic minorities or gender minorities or sexual minorities or any kind of minorities, even majority populations, are, definitely everybody's struggling pretty much worldwide and locally, in our own country in the U.S. and also where I live in Southern California, just everything from, food to, affordable gas to affordable anything pretty much. And we all know, that one of some major areas that get impacted that, cause stressors at the least for people are usually related to financial things or social things, right? And so, we were cut off from each other socially for nearly 2 years or so, over 2 years. And then, in the midst of that, there were definitely economic problems going on, but now they're still continued. And then there's still the scares of like COVID spikes and all these kinds of things impacting people's ability to work and people trying to find jobs that they can actually pay the bills and all these kinds of things. And so all of that ties into, things that I've been noticing, like a lot more ambulances being kind of like driving around with sirens on, and a lot more, distress, especially in like the YouTube world. I know, like, I follow a lot of finance stuff. I follow a lot of comedy stuff. I follow a lot of stuff about LGBT stuff. I follow a lot about hemp and cannabis and psilocybin and all sorts of things. And I'm noticing trends in people looking into these details more, and a lot of the details along the lines of finance, mental health, physical health, just concerns with like even being able to eat, buy gas, afford gas, get like reliable transportation that's affordable and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is not really good news. A lot of it's like, okay, like we're kind of, and we've been in a situation where it's impactful for people, but I'm noticing a lot of people also kind of turning to substance, looking at substances, relapsing on substances, people using more. A lot of people are trying to like escape or feel like different or feel a relaxation or function a little better as far as like process things faster and like work faster and be more productive and alert while they're at work and focusing or trying to like find jobs. So there's the combination of the people who are looking for stuff that like either numbs them or takes their mind off stuff or makes them feel de-stressed, and then another combination of the people who are so overwhelmed that their energy level is just slowed down naturally and because of the stress levels, and so they're needing to kind of like amp up, somehow, so they're using things to kind of do that. And then there's like pain concerns associated with a lot of people with somatic types of complaints. A lot of us hold a lot of our stress in our bodies physically, with anxiety, with depression, with trauma, with all sorts of things. The stress, like sleep problems, things like that. A lot of people, you'll notice you're more sore, you feel physically slower, you're more just irritable, just groggy, and all kinds of things. And this is just like on a natural day to day without even considering substances. Just people aren't feeling well. They aren't feeling like they're functioning the way they want to, or they're not feeling like they're able to relax when they feel like they want to. Usually those are the areas that are most common, but there are a lot of things like on other areas too, but those are the most common that I'm noticing. And then, so taking that, usually what is considered like harder drugs, there are things that are usually illegal but are harder drugs. And so you would say things like cocaine or methamphetamine. Those are considered hard drugs that, there are others too, but those are considered hard drugs that are kind of like street drugs. You don't really get them. I mean, you can get methadone prescribed, but it's not supposed to really be like it's to manage use, and so it's not really considered like a substance. Almost like if you were taking some prescribed medication, those could still potentially be categorized as a substance or drug of some form. But also because it's managed and people are following up, and they're seeing like, is it managing the issue that it's meant to manage, that the provider wanted someone to see a prescriber for, then usually a lot of times prescription, even methadone clinic appointments where people are getting methadone, that's usually considered not considered a substance. Or even things like B12, B6, vitamins, things like that. They can be a stimulant of a form, but also you find them in vitamins and like one-a-days, and vitamin water has like some type of B vitamins, B12, whatever. There's a lot of stuff that's like for energy that might be caffeine free, but it still has B vitamins, things like that. There are a lot of vitamins out there that a lot of people wouldn't really classify that as like a substance, right? But I mean, in a way, it kind of depends. So there are things like prescriptions, methadone, vitamins, that, people don't really consider those as substances, even though you could still technically get a form of dependence on it, meaning that if you stop taking it, you notice some kind of a side effect or some kind of impact, like on your mood, on your sleep, on, you might have physical withdrawal symptoms, things like that. So, yeah, and so that's an interesting thing that, usually if a doctor's involved or if it's considered something healthy, a lot of times people won't look at that as a substance. But it can be, in all honesty, it can be. Anything pretty much can be abused. So just because it doesn't qualify, and I'm just saying all these things so people can know educationally for themselves, because I think it's hard for us to be aware of our own conditions, aware of our own selves, and catch things early before they spiral out of control to a point where it feels unmanageable. And, if you don't really know, hey, maybe look out for this. It might sound like a great idea to be like, hey, I'm caffeine free now and I'm, not using stimulants, but I'm drinking like 6 vitamin waters a day. Or like people who say that like they're not taking stimulants, they're not taking meth, they're not taking speed, they're not taking like certain stuff to kind of get them, amped up, but then they're like drinking like 8 coffees or like 3 monsters and things like that, where it's like, yeah, a lot of stuff can be considered a substance in a way. And so it can be abused even if it's not really seen as a substance. So there are things that are substances that are still there are things that are substances that are there are things that are substances sorry there are things that are substances that people don't necessarily they're socially acceptable, for example. So I already talked about like the medication prescriptions, and then from that, a little higher up level would be the I guess like somewhere on the lower level of problematic would be like the vitamin related things versus the and like prescription medication type of things. Anything can be dangerous. There's nothing that's like zero risk, right? But yeah, then you get into like the things that are socially acceptable. So where I live, it's socially acceptable to be having alcohol or caffeine or sugar. Those things aren't really looked at as bad or altering in a way that's, well, they are seen as altering. And cigarettes, I think I said cigarettes, but yeah, those things aren't really like there's not really a lot of taboo around them. Maybe depending on your upbringing and like if you're religious of some sort, or just really kind of like family members that have bad experiences with like alcohol addictions or things like that, or like people in your family remaining sober, or even if it just comes from a place of health, that's usually where you see people not really wanting to use anything like that. But a lot of times caffeine isn't usually considered a substance, but it's in coffee a lot of times, it's in tea a lot of times, it's in there's even like supplements like C4, for example, Neon C4, a lot of like pre-workouts that are stimulants, like I mentioned, like Monsters, Red Bulls, that like energy drinks, that kind of thing. They have caffeine, they have, all kinds of weird stuff. Some of them say sugar-free, but it's other kind of like sweetening kind of things. A lot of this stuff can get you like super amped up, super wired. I'm really sensitive to a lot of it. So like even today, I did have some coffee earlier, and I know you're not really supposed to have C4 with coffee, but I had coffee a little earlier, and then I was like, I really am having like a bit of a stressful day, and I don't think I'm going to work out adequately after work. So I knew I was going to be on hold for like 15 to 20 minutes. So during my hold time during work, I had like a sip, like a gulp of a pre-workout. I did some yoga while I was on hold, and then Once the C4 kind of kicked in, I did like a 30-minute workout. And so I got in a workout today mostly for that reason. Because I did it during work. And I had like a 30-minute break, which was my lunch break. I used that as a I used my 30-minute lunch. So there's that, and then there's also not only the 30-minute lunch break, but just kind of being able to work out, right? But I know for myself, caffeine, stimulants like that, like the pre-workouts and stuff, they don't really make me feel too good once they start wearing off. They feel good when they kick in, but when they start wearing off, I'm like, I just feel like a little like agitated, irritable. And so at that point, usually it I'd probably vape or something, like an indica or hybrid indica dominant THC vape or CBD vape or something like that. I'd say edibles are usually too strong, but I'm not saying that I don't ever have any, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of where my head goes, is like, okay, like, you bring yourself up, then bring yourself down. So I get how people kind of do that. But, I do notice for my own self, like I mentioned, like a gulp of like a mix, like the C4 powder mixed with water. I don't drink the whole dosage of 200 milligrams worth of caffeine, and it has other stuff in it too, so I don't usually drink all that because I never really need that much energy. But I feel like the gulp usually gets me energized enough to get in a workout, and then but I do need something to bring me off of the edge of it, like once it starts kind of wearing off. It doesn't feel too pleasant, and I'm like, I can't really like deal with my whole evening feeling like that, all like irritated and weird. And so that is already something in itself where I'm like, okay, I don't have energy enough to really like get in a decent workout if I'm not having any kind of a stimulant. But then if I do have a stimulant, then it leads to having to use something else because the come down from the stimulant is like too intense for me to really feel comfortable. Like, I don't have to, it's not like I need to or have to use anything in the evening, but it's just kind of preferred for me if I know I'm going to be around like family or friends and socializing and having to interact. I really value my relationships, and I try not to be, a dick to people, and try not to be like a jerk. Actually, I hate saying that. I hate saying like a dick, because that it's kind of like a weird way of, I don't know. Maybe I'm taking this too far, but I don't really have a thing against people with penises, and I feel like kind of saying like a dick kind of almost makes it assume like that there's something with people who identify as male who have those body parts. It's kind of like assuming like maybe some kind of toxic masculinity or something along those lines. I never, like, in my head, it just, saying that doesn't really, I was trying not to say asshole, and that's what came out. But it's like, I guess we all have assholes, so I don't know. But I guess, I don't know. I've got nothing against males. I've got nothing against genitalia. I'm just saying, I'm trying not to be a jerk. So, yeah, but, I don't know. I look into things too much sometimes, and I think too much about it. But so yeah, that's kind of what it looks like on an end of like supplements and things like that. Like, that's my example of kind of like something that would be not out of the norm for me. I can't do it daily. I can't do like a daily C4, even if it's like a gulp. I can't do too much. Like, you're not really supposed to have C4 on the same day as any other stimulants of any kind, like tea or coffee, and so, or energy drinks or Red Bulls or any other kind of thing like that. And most people do take the full 200 milligrams. I probably take like in the single digits worth of milligrams. I'm gonna have to measure it out and see, but I'm pretty sure it's not a high amount. But yeah, things like that, like looking into if you're taking something the right way or the wrong way, and just like, are you just doing it to try to function? Like today for me, that was the most functional thing. I was like, I'm trying to keep things as balanced as I can on my routines. And so for me, it made more sense to use my lunch break and use, because I can eat during work while I'm like still on hold with other calls after lunch, after my actual 30-minute lunch break. Because I'm working remotely from home, so I can always just do the calls and stuff, and sit on hold. And sometimes I strategically schedule to make the calls that I know are going to take longer wait times when I know I'm going to need to just like eat lunch or something. And so I'll be just like on hold for like ages, for like 50 minutes worth of like hold times over like 3 or 4 calls. And that's enough time to like eat. And then I'd rather have a workout in during my lunch break versus resting or watching a video or something while I'm eating. For me today, that was more worth it. So after considering those kind of substances, you kind of want to look at so I mentioned the things that are kind of common. So outside of caffeine, I think caffeine is the most people consider caffeine to be the most acceptable socially. From there, you have cigarettes, nicotine. So smoking is considered, kind of socially acceptable, even though, nicotine is addictive. You can get tobacco without nicotine, I think. And you can just smoke that. I don't know if tobacco naturally has nicotine or if the nicotine's added. That shows you how much I know. I don't know if cigars have nicotine, but cigarettes can be addictive. And then beer, alcohol, hard liquor, things in the alcohol category. That's probably about, between cigarettes and alcohol, those are probably the most socially acceptable, where people start getting like diagnoses, like common diagnoses, like nicotine dependence, alcohol dependence, things like that. Now, I mentioned that there are other kind of hard drugs, and then there's other stuff that's kind of more kind of in the middle, somewhere between alcohol and things like meth and coke comes like psychedelics and cannabis. I would put them kind of in the middle, because they've been kind of villainized. I'm not saying that I villainize them, but I'm saying like throughout history, they got shut down in most of the world to not be using it, and they're illegal in a lot of places in the world still. There's still a lot of debate going on about like cannabis use, CBD use, CBN use, just hemp itself. What would be some other things other than hemp? Like there's like psilocybin, or what people know as like shrooms, magic mushrooms. There's acid, LSD. I think I mentioned speed before. I think speed would be, I'm not talking about like Schedule 1, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm talking about just how society tends to see things, right? And then you have like there's other stuff like ketamine, kava, I would put cacao. I would put cacao kind of more in the area where I was talking more about like vitamins. I would put cacao kind of like lower on the list. as far as like socially what people would maybe, I would put cacao maybe in the same category as like a vitamin water or like a something like that. Um and then yeah, just basically psychedelics in general. A combo, different types of like plant medicines, ayahuasca. I mean, there are a lot of things that are traditional. I feel like a lot of things in that area um, between alcohol and before you start getting to like speed, meth, that kind of thing. I feel like a lot of those like psychedelic property type of and psychoactive type of things, they a lot of times traditionally throughout history have been used for medicines, um, maybe recreational too, but you know, it wasn't till recently that you really started seeing too much about recreational. Um, and then, so yeah. And then, so what it looks like for people to have like a dependence or like a problem of a sort is usually people look at the impact on somebody's life. Now, the impact doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a person is like strung out on something, you know, in some kind of a, you know, abandoned house somewhere, just not able to function, like laying around on the ground like that. That's more extreme. Um, it can look anywhere from, you know, overspending too much on something out of your budget, to, you know, making risky decisions like not Ubering when you shouldn't, you know, when you shouldn't be driving, but, you know, driving instead of Ubering. Or it can look like just socially being kind of not as nice as you could be, or, you know, emotionally or mentally not being kind of as, you know, conscious of and aware of what your surroundings are, or, you know, in an altered state of consciousness, or, you know, then you start looking at things like withdrawal symptoms. So if a person stops using whatever it is there a certain like physical or emotional thing that is distressing that happens? Or if not only just like stopping use, like is somebody increasing their use to get the same effects? That happens a lot with coffee, for example. People say, you know, I used to drink like a third of a cup of coffee. Now I'm drinking 2 cups of coffee a day, you know, just to get the same like energy level, right? And so just taking those kind of things into account, that's kind of what it looks like. And then things that kind of drive people to this, to using different things, you know, it kind of depends. Like a lot of people go to like psychedelics and things like that, and like traditional medicines, plant medicines, when they're more interested in like a spiritual type of answer, spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, some kind of like they might have a value in different states of consciousness and things like that, dream like states while you're awake, and all kinds of different types of things, and like I mentioned at the very beginning about some people needing more energy, they'd likely go to some type of a stimulant like caffeine, meth, pre-workouts, energy drinks. I mean, nicotine can be a stimulant too. Some people want to come down from something, they would probably go more towards like cannabis. Alcohol, it kind of depends on the situation. You can have like a turn up at a party, alcohol might help, but some people after work, they have like wine or, you know, a drink, and it kind of helps them relax a little bit. And so that's kind of what it looks like on the surface anyways. A lot of it, there's more depth to it. But the best way initially to be able to cope is to just look at your daily life, your daily schedule, when you use, or weekly schedule or monthly schedules, when you use what, where you are when you're doing it, and when you're using it, like what leads you to use it. And once you're very aware of that, you'll be able to find different methods that you can cope with whatever that is. Because if you don't really know what you're doing to kind of get what affects when, like I was mentioning about the, wanting to work out, wanting to stay on my schedule, having some trouble with like staying on my routines, it was kind of like, okay, do this to get this, and then do this to get to the next step of your later in the evening. That's kind of how I saw it today. It wasn't necessarily like I'm trying to get like turned, or trying to get like, stoned, or trying to be like wired. I'm just trying to like stick to my routines. And that was kind of for today the best option for me to be able to do it, using some kind of altering thing, right? I feel like if I wouldn't have had any C4, I probably wouldn't have gotten a decent enough workout. If I, wasn't vaping, if I hadn't vaped at all, I probably would be like super irritated and just like not able to even record a podcast, not really able to want to do anything, and I'd be probably just like super highly anxious. And mind you, I know my body now and my mind well enough to know how much I can take of what, to not impact my sleep at night, to not impact my mood during the rest of my evening, to not impact my work. Like, I'm not like vaping during work, but yeah, but that's kind of all I have to say about that. Just kind of a tidbit on these things, and hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully it was helpful. All right, thanks for listening.